Hello and welcome to this discussion about blue zones. In this video, I'd like to share some of the terminology that you are likely to hear. Just as part of any zone discussion, you'll hear about the common things that the different blue zones had, where the blue zones are, and that kind of thing. But there will be some other things that you may hear about, and it would be nice for you to have that terminology before you're exposed to that conference or to that topic. So one of the things I want to talk about is compression of mortality, and this is also known as rectangularization, and I'll spell that here. And so hopefully you see this word rectangle and in other words, to make something more like a rectangle. And what this means is rectangularization has to do with mortality. And if we look at a normal kind of a survival curve, here's the number of years, let's say the population is living. Let's say this is our average number of years. And we know that we have some infant mortality and then kind of drops off like so. If we were to look at a mortality curve, say 200 years ago, what we would see is a lot different. We would see a lot more infant mortality and then kind of death happening over the lifetime, and a few people living to that particular age, maybe into their 70s or 80s that we're having now, but a lot more kind of this down slope right here. A lot more deaths happening in kind of the early and middle age. So that's what this means by rectangularization, which is that over time, as we have fewer and fewer deaths due to things that can impact somebody in infancy, childhood, young adulthood, middle age, as we don't have the infectious diseases that are killing people as they used to, then people are kind of living longer, and we have this much flatter slope of the survival curve, and then a quick downturn where a lot of the mortality is happening all at the same time. Now, that's related to the mortality, which is people dying, but the same kind of a thing can happen with morbidity, and we do not call it rectangularization, but you just need to be aware that some people confuse the two of these, and so they will call something rectangularization, and what they mean really is compression of morbidity. And compression of morbidity is really very similar, and what that means is that you have, like, let's say, a person's life, or on average a group of people, and they go along and they go along and they're very healthy and healthy and healthy and healthy and healthy, and then suddenly at an older age they become sick. Maybe they have a stroke and they die in a very short time period. In other words, the period of time from when a person first starts being sick and from when they die is kind of this compressed time, this short time. They live a long life and they don't have morbidity or illness. They're not sick, and so that they have this period of time where it's a very long life where they are independent, they're able to support themselves and do the activities of life and contribute and work and all of those kinds of things. Now, that is as opposed to, say, a person who, they have a fairly healthy childhood, but then they start becoming sick. Maybe they have diabetes, and then they get to the point where it's very difficult for them to walk and care for themselves, and then they finally succumb. And so this person has this length of time where they are affected by something. It could be diabetes due to obesity. It could be that they struggle with cancer and they have remissions and then it comes back, and so it can be a variety of different things that causes them to live a less than their ideal or their full life. And so compression of morbidity means that we are doing things so that a person can, as as somebody has coined the phrase, adding years to life. So in other words, we're making it so that the average person is living longer, but then also adding life to years. I need to find out who said that. You probably know. I think it's David Katz, but I'm not positive. So adding life to years and years to life. So the idea is that not just living longer and being in this kind of sick, prolonged sick stage, but actually having a better life while you're living that life, feeling good, having energy, being able to do the things that you want to do, to travel and spend time with your family and have meaningful activities. So compression of morbidity has to do with not being sick for the time that you are alive, and compression of mortality means that for an average population, that the population itself is having mortality in a much narrower time frame. Okay, so the third concept that I want to talk about a little bit is this idea of transplanting blue zones. And blue zones are these areas that tend to have a high number of centenarians, people who live to be 100 years old. So what they did is they studied 5 different areas, and they've discovered more of them also now that there's been more time gone by. And so people that lived to be 100 years old and they continued to be functioning and contributing to society and sharp and enjoying life, what a lot of people have thought about is, well, can we take those same concepts, the things that we found that those blue zones have in common, and actually create new communities that are experiencing that same thing? It may not be that we get people all the way to 100 years old, but maybe we can accomplish this idea of living healthier years, or having on average kind of people not having illnesses earlier on in their life that cause part of the population to die. So these 3 concepts are kind of 3 ideas that I'd like for you to think about. I have posted some articles and different things. It should not take you very much time to really look through that and really understand it much better. By reading about it, I've highlighted the articles themselves, maybe several pages long, but I've highlighted on the first or second page some things to look at, and then also on one of them, all I did was highlight one of the graphs that I thought would be helpful, because sometimes it's helpful to look at somebody's graph. So I encourage you to look over those and spend just a few minutes. Also, there are some videos that talk about the blue zone and the original National Geographic article that you can look at. So I encourage you to do that so that you feel a little more familiar and you can get a lot more out of the assignment that's coming up. Thank you for joining me.